Hello, folks. Welcome to Between Awesome and Disaster. This is your host, Will Carey. I appreciate you folks tuning in. I hope you're doing well. Hope you're staying healthy, taking care of those closest to you. Whirlwind of a week. Oh my gosh. And I have even more crazy weeks coming up that I will tell you guys about in the very near future. But let's see. Let's just to go over this week before we get into the show. Finally, 2.5 years after I initially purchased them, I got to see My Chemical Romance live for my fourth time. So I saw them this most recent time at the Barclays Center. I remember buying these tickets in the before times, the day the tour went on sale, when they sold out in 6 hours, and me and everyone in my office was like, it turned into like the emo stock exchange because everyone was so many people were furiously trying to get tickets, and then the pandemic hit, and then the shows got postponed, and it took a while. It seemed like, well, when is the tour going to actually happen? And then it finally did. And I gotta say, every member of the band is, of course, a dream guest for this podcast, but I think they sound just as good as when I had seen them all the previous times. I remember seeing them on Warped Tour during the Three Cheers for Sweet Revenge era. I remember the Black Parade tour that I think the openers were Muse, actually. Now that I think about it, that was a pretty cool bill, and they sounded great then. I saw them at Merriweather Post Pavilion, and then the last time I saw them when they were touring for the Fabulous Killjoys was at the Honda Civic Tour with Blink-182 and Alkaline Trio, and now I got to see them again with a very cool kind of like classic rock power pop Americana band called the Lemon Twigs, and seminal New Jersey hardcore band Thursday. So that was Sunday, and then Tuesday, or Wednesday actually. Tuesday, I saw Clerks 3 in the theater, which I really loved. I know some people, as a fan of Kevin Smith, as a fan of those movies and those characters, I really enjoyed it. I think it took the story went some places that I was not expecting it to go, even after seeing the trailer and kind of getting the general gist. I thought I knew where we were going to end, but it goes to some really kind of emotional places that I was, I guess, maybe not like surprised, but like I could not predict. But there's some great performances, and I really enjoyed it a lot. So if you're a fan of Clerks, I would definitely say check it out. Because I think it does the series and the characters justice for sure. And then Wednesday, I was fortunate enough to get to see my local football team, New York City Football Club, play in the Campeones Cup, which is a annual tournament where the MLS Cup champion plays the Liga MX, Mexican League's champion in a game. And there's a trophy involved. And I was nervous going into it for a couple reasons. One is that, one being that New York City has been on a run of not winning for a little while after our main striker Tati Castellanos, I'm a part of the team, obviously, was loaned to a team in Spain. We had not had the best run of form, especially after our coach left. So there's that. And then the other nerve-wracking thing, this is based off of my experience going to games in Spain, and then also what I think my experience will be like going to a big game in the future. We were sitting, I was sitting where I normally sit with my wife Chelsea, and the overwhelming majority of people around us were fans of the opposing team, Atlas FC from Mexico. So I was just afraid that I was going to get beat up, get something thrown at me, regardless of if we won or lost. But all the chaos happened a couple rows over from where we were. So managed to get out, and New York City FC won 2-0. So that was pretty exciting to be able to get to see live. I thought that was pretty cool. And that's been my week. I feel like my like my heart like starts to like race like in anticipation of so many things because my a good friend of mine, former guest of the show, is getting married this weekend, and I am in the wedding. So there's that and a bunch of other things that I will keep up to date with you. But let's talk about the next today and then next week on the show. So my guest on the show today is comedian Justin Williams, hilarious comic from the New York City area. He actually is lives in New Jersey, runs a great, produces a great show in Newark, New Jersey. Justin Williams. Haven't seen him in a while, so it was great to be able to chat with him and get and catch up. Super funny guy, super thoughtful, smart dude. I love listening to this guy talk. And then because I'm going to be away the week after, but I want to make sure I have something for you guys. So I do apologize in advance for this, but I will have another re-release episode the week after this. But in anticipation of this guy returning to the show, it will be my conversation with Cody, the drummer of Goalkeeper, who will then be returning to the show in October. And then we'll have a new conversation about their upcoming single, Car Wreck, that comes out on September 30th. But I have chatted your ear off far enough at the beginning of this monologue. There's just a lot going on, and I wanted to share it with you. But let's talk to my friend, the incredibly funny Justin Williams. So which always kind of puts me all this like adult kind of like adult responsibilities, because I don't know if you've ever felt this way, but like when I started doing comedy, I was trying to like, there's probably a part of me that was like trying to get away from like traditional adult responsibilities, or like, oh, those things that adults do, I won't have to do that, whether comedy works out or doesn't, because
Oh, you need it, especially if it works out, because or else you're like Dane Cook, your brother just takes all of your money.
I know. I was recently watching like him talk about that on a thing, and I just kept thinking like, oh man, I can't imagine like like I could never like even like my if like $15 goes away from my account, I'm just like, oh, I got to track that down if I wasn't planning for it. I don't know how you miss $12 million, but I guess when you're that rich, 12 million becomes like your $12.
Yeah, that's crazy. I feel like I would check my online banking a lot still.
Yeah, I know it doesn't always make a ton of sense to me, but dude, I it's been a long time. I'm so glad to that we're doing this. I'm very happy to chat with you, man, because I think you are a delight, personally and as a comedian.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Same to you, man. You know, it's weird now. Like, have you felt an absence in your heart now? What are we in now? Like 2 years without the creek in the cave existing?
Yeah, now that it's since it's relocated, I think that's about what we're looking at. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I was thinking about that the other day. Like how it was cool just to be in a place where you would just see people all the time. And it's also
Hmm.
some things have changed in my life. Like like I have like a kid and stuff like that. So I'm not like hanging out anymore. So it's also part of that.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I miss because I remember like after a couple years of going there consistently, like I felt like I was kind of like accepted into the community finally. And then once I felt like I was a part of the community, I really treasured that place. That became the Creek in New York was my like comedy store in the 80s.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. No, but even when I think about all the people that came out through there, or people that I started with there, or people that started just before the people that started just before me are like now like the top comedians, like technically younger comedians on the road now, right? Which is like kind of cool to see. But yeah, and then all the crazy shows, all the people that never did comedy ever again is even like good memories from the Creek. Um, just the experimental show didn't
Hmm.
work out, or the incidents that happened there. There's it's just like so much cool. So the funny stories. There's a lot. I hung out there for like 9 years, and I'm only 38, so it's weird to have hung out in a place almost like a fourth of your life.
Oh yeah, that's so crazy. Yeah, because I showed up there when I first moved to New York, probably within the first month when I was 23 at the time. I'm 36 now.
Yeah.
So yeah, like a giant chunk of my formative years were in this basement in this tiny black box theater. Like I remember seeing Chris Gethard record his first album there. I would go and see I'd go and see Wildcats there all the time, and dude, just the most depraved things I've ever seen happen on stage. And then I like really remember like in that basement once they built that glass room with the garage. I remember like really finding myself and like finding a different voice down there. Because that's when I started doing storytelling open mics, was going to Jake Hart's open mic, and I learned how to do long form comedy by doing that open mic. Before I was just a set up punchline person.
Yeah, I started at the Creek downstairs before there was the cage, so that's where I learned how to project, because you would have to yell over whatever show was letting out into your show, or
Right. Uh-huh.
yeah. So that was good though. It was good. I was all like experience points, So we were happy once we got upstairs. We were like, "Oh, this is good." You mean there's chairs and people are here to see the show? They're not just like walking by and looking.
Or waiting in line for the bathroom. Yeah, exactly. It was like, all right, this is what it can be. I dig it. I'm a fan of this. I like this Creek part.
It was all still better. It got me out of the 5:30 at the comic strip. I was like, as long as I knew that as long as I was performing at night, I was moving in the right direction. Like sun up comedy is not where you want to be at. Not the 5:30 slot at the comedy club.
No, definitely not. Like doing those like, oh god, I remember doing those like 4 o'clock audition shows at New York Comedy Club, and just like, okay, maybe I'll get a call in a few months. Never did.
That was like the bad New York Comedy Club, not
I'm
new
happy
hip. Cool.
I'm happy that. Yeah, no, this was the old one.
Yeah.
The old New York Comedy Club, not like the one with the like 8th Street location. Like that was the time. So let me ask you, did you start doing comedy at the Creek? Like, where did you start doing stand up?
I started at the comic strip on the Upper East Side on the 5:30 show.
Uh-huh.
And it was good. It was actually good. I started with a great group of people that are still lifelong friends. Most of us are like working comedians still. Like all of us enjoyed a lot of level of success. What I think is funny is everybody out of our cohort, like it was like a very good draft class. If you were to say all of us that started at the same time, but
yeah,
it's funny that none of us like got passed at the strip, except for maybe like I think only one of us ended up being passed at the strip, but we all work like all over the world.
Maybe you can go back now and do like a show just so you can.
No. So that was during. I don't even know who was looking at them, but they like the word was that they had like passed on like Hannibal Buress around the same time, and they had passed on like Mike Kaplan, and they'd passed on all these other people. So that was actually what led to me going to the Creek, because I was like, hey, I think I have a limited future here, no matter what I do.
Right. That then the great equalizer of the alternative comedy scene is like, yes, we will take all of the misfits that don't have a spot at the club because they just passed like whoever, and they can't have two of the same type of comedian.
Yeah, I'm not a jealous person at all, but it was just like it just wasn't necessarily merit based. Like when they like sometimes like gimmick comedians would get passed, where it was just like this is just a person from Russia. Like it wasn't even like they weren't even like a comic with an act.
Yeah, just going on like the novelty of it for a diversity of lineup. I guess I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know the rationale I know the booker that didn't pass me. I know he tried to be a comic, and one of his things was one of his big bits. He would read the phone book with a funny voice.
Oh man.
He was giving notes on people's material. Like when you look back at this, it's like ridiculous, right?
Yeah, like to hold that much esteem in that in that person's opinion is just like, why? I clearly just was in the wrong element. Or I remember a friend of mine from Baltimore during his time out in Los Angeles. I remember him doing some showcase at like maybe the Improv. Like it was at a club. It wasn't like an alt room. And this guy gets on stage with a microphone and just dips the microphone into a giant cup of ranch dressing and then just starts licking the ranch dressing off the mic and crushes with this ranch dressing bit. And I'm just like, oh, there's no hope, is there?
Wait, but is that person passed? Is that like their big closer now? They're like still doing it?
Oh gosh, I wonder. Like, I wonder if they had to diversify and like, well, I incorporate blue cheese now. Sometimes, I'll do like a queso. I'll do like a spinach and artichoke. Just depending on the room, depending on. I got to feel it out before, and I bring a grocery bag.
It's so funny. I think you should take that on tour. You should become like the dip like, but you should change your name to like Dippin' Man.
Yeah, or you could do like, or maybe you want to franchise the act. You could get like someone named Dot to do the act. You could do a logo that's a play on Dippin' Dots. It's just Dippin' Dot.
I like again. I've been thinking about getting a real strong gimmick, or maybe performing it as like a different guy sometimes. So Devo used to do that. Devo used to open for themselves as Dove, the Band of Love, and it was an evangelical Christian version of Devo.
No way. I didn't know that. That's a brilliant idea. That's like a perfectly Devo thing to do. That's genius. Just kind of do like some absurd character and then come out as yourself and just be like, "Oh, give it up for my opener, everybody."
Yeah, that's great. That could be the next new thing, is being your own opening comic.
I think it makes perfect sense. I feel like especially for like now that there's so many like comedians that get popular through TikTok or like TikTokers that get popular on that app, they could kind of have their own absurdist character open for themselves once or headline for themselves and then they open for their character.
Yeah, so I've never seen TikTok. I just got on Instagram 4 months ago.
Really?
Yeah, I kind of thought Facebook was gonna be the one that was gonna be like the one that was important to be on, and that ended up being completely wrong. So
Uh, right. Uh, that's interesting to me because I feel like I mean the idea of like a comic not being on every single possible available social media, like it sounds it's odd nowadays, but that's something. But yeah, no, Facebook really we really put all of put all the chips in on the site that ended up like ruining democracy.
yeah, yeah. I always tell people the 2016 election has made Facebook like a shopping mall that experienced a mass shooting, but they just didn't close the mall. And just like nobody's really talking. Like a lot of people didn't come back to the mall, but the people that are still there, it's just not the same. Something's wrong.
Yeah, the vibe is just off. Or if you've ever seen the documentary Jasper Hill Mall about this dying mall in Alabama, kind of like that. Like half the stores are closed. Nobody's really shopping there, but people are still working. And there's like the only events are like a church choir or church band will come and play on Sundays. Like that.
Yeah, I grew up in the era where malls died across the Kansas City area. And my like
Uh-huh.
hangout growing up was like coincided with the death of this place called Bannister Mall. And it was just
Okay.
like, just like white people just quit going to the mall, and it just started this like death spiral. And what's cool about a dying mall is like the weird stuff that gets to come in during the last days, where it's just like, when Sam Goody
Uh-huh.
leaves, or your main department stores leave, it just becomes just like a random Arab guy with like hookahs. Just has like 40,000 square feet of space for like 2 months.
Yeah, like the rug importer or like decorative basket weaver, or like I or like maybe like I feel like sometimes maybe there's like an African handicrafts like woven baskets, dashiki's kind of place sometimes that comes in.
Oh yeah, there's always an Afrocentric. Yeah, that's when black small business gets a chance. When the mall is getting like, as the wrecking ball is in the parking lot, you can get like a painting of like Black Jesus before they knock it down.
Yeah, exactly. Which, oh my god, that would be a fascinating like podcast episode, like like a deep dive on that phenomenon. I could totally see that. So you grew up in Kansas City, Kansas or Missouri?
Mostly the Missouri part, but they're really close to each other, so I spent time on both sides of the border.
Hmm. And what was basically like I don't know like the Midwest or Southern Midwest at all. What's going on in Missouri? I know Kansas City is has some stuff going on, but Missouri as a whole, what was like your experience growing up there?
It's pretty varied because Missouri is a border state. Like you mentioned, like if you go to the southern end of Missouri, you're talking about, the Ozarks. You're culturally in the sort of south in the Bible Belt. Kansas
Uh-huh.
City and St. Louis are like they're the last cities of the urban Midwest, right? And then even Kansas City, where I grew up, is like a Great Plains city culturally. Like it's almost like feels a little bit more Western because it's the last city in the Midwest. And then if you go over to like St. Louis, it's kind of like a smaller version of Chicago, so it's like slightly different culturally.
Mhm.
If you're on I-70 though, if you're in Kansas City, St. Louis, and Columbia, where the University of Missouri is, you're in a blue state. If you go south or north of that, then you're kind of in a red state.
I know what you mean. I grew up in Maryland, and it's kind of similar. Like Baltimore, kind of cosmopolitan. Where I'm from, pretty. It's a combination of like rednecks and like artsy people,
Mhm.
because it's like a vacation spot. And then you head over to Western Maryland, and it's just mountains and hillbillies.
Yeah, I liked it when I grew up. I grew up when Missouri was a swing state, so it was good. Like everybody kind of had kind of equal representation, so it was kind of like
Hmm.
you had to everybody had to fight for their ideas, and it didn't get too stupid because there was balance. Now there's no balance. Now Missouri's kind of slipped into like solid red state territory, and actually trending towards like cartoonish red state territory. We'll see who gets elected in this next Senate election, but you know, uh,
Hmm.
when the governor that had to resign, and Josh Hawley, he's always writing these books about manhood. What's funny is every old school Republican in the state of Missouri hates him though. They're like, "You are our worst mistake. You have thrown off the balance of this state."
Yeah, yeah, Hallie. Oh my God, he's the worst, or one of the worst, because there's a lot of the worst now. But I guess there's. I'm glad that there's at least some of the old guard that is like, we created you, then we really made some mistakes.
Yeah, they've just lost control of the room though. So the problem is nobody cares what the old wise Republicans think. Like nobody, because like they're
Hmm.
not on. Roy Blunt and John Danforth, and if you go over to Kansas, Bob Dole, they're not on like Fox News and all this stuff. So no young Trump supporter cares about what they think, even though they're like telling you all of this is a bad idea.
Right, and they're just caught up in the like, uh, the desire to kind of, and this is something I've thought about as well, especially because I watched that Trump documentary that was on Discovery Plus. that they didn't have any editorial control over. And there was a scene of Junior like giving at a rally, and he puts his hand on the mic stand, and I'm like, these are all just people who I feel like deep down want to be comedians and aren't funny. So they're just being they're just doing like political rallies and just dunking on one side to get the rush of the crowd.
Yeah, once it becomes all about firing up the crowd and like no policy content, uh, then you're actually in entertainer territory anyway. So the problem is that a lot of times entertainers don't try to demagogue against like specific vulnerable groups. Doesn't happen. Only sometimes they do. But at least even when they do it, they have jokes, so they can at least say they're joking.
Yeah, exactly. They give you at least that shred of the benefit of the doubt. And when you were growing up there, was what kind of kid were you? Were you like early interested in comedy early on? Were you more of like a bookish kid? Were you like into like pop culture?
Oh yeah, I was interested in comedy because I was allowed to watch things that other kids weren't allowed to watch. So I grew up watching like Richard Pryor and Rodney Dangerfield and like Eddie Murphy and stuff like that. So and then my parents were divorced and stuff like that. So and then I moved around a lot when I was little. So like being a class clown was a way that I would be able to make friends instantly in like new schools and stuff like that. So yeah, I gravitated towards comedy like pretty early.
Were you a lonely kid?
Not really, because I learned how to build social networks with people really fast. Like that's one thing I learned about uh, growing up. And I also have a little brother that lived in the house with me as well. So it wasn't loneliness. It was just learning how to establish yourself in a place because you had done it so many times.
Gotcha. I can understand that. So comedy was early on for you. That's cool. And when it came to like when you started getting older, like this interest is always there. Did you have an interest in performance, or did that come later?
That came later. I wasn't interested in actually performing comedy until going to see Paul Mooney perform in like 2008 or something like that at Caroline's.
I've heard of these Paul Mooney shows that happened at Caroline's. I think Harrison Greenbaum opened a couple of those. What was a Paul Mooney show like? I never got to see him live.
It was a show that Harrison Greenbaum probably was not the ideal opener for.
Yeah, it's a definite contrast in styles for sure.
It's like you take a Jewish comedian that knows magic tricks and then have him open for the most Afrocentric comedian. Yeah, it was the closest. Paul Mooney was like, did you miss out on the 1960s where comics were just saying crazy shit on stage? It's like, well, you can have it in this room in like the early 2000s.
Nice. So it was just like, I don't give a fuck. I'm saying exactly what I think and feel. And I'm gonna be like really funny along the way because I've heard him like, I think Maron describes like Mooney's style as like, because his act is like very heavily like all about race, and I think Maron would say that he would find like the racism in white people that don't think they're racist.
Oh yeah, I mean it was just saying things that make people like super uncomfortable because you're just not used to hearing like a black person talk that way. Or like even he's passing conspiracy theories that are
Right.
like purposefully like inflammatory towards white people. He's just like Queen Elizabeth is a nigga. White people know it. You know it. Look at this woman. She's mad at me. She's mad at me. She's looking at me. She's like smarter than an average runaway. That's right. And you're like, what? He's accused. It's like all in this one sentence. He's like, he said the Queen of England is actually black, And then he's accused this white woman of thinking that he's a runaway slave, right? So usually the white people in the show would all walk out if they were accidentally there. They would all walk
Yeah.
out within the first probably 15, 20 minutes. And Paul Mooney would almost like taunt them out the door. He'd be like, there they go, just like some white bunny rabbits. They'll get up out of here. I've been listening to it to my whole life, and they can't take it for 10 minutes. They can't take it. They can't take it. And like the black audience is like egging it on. Like it's like in an alternate universe, like if you wanted to say what would like a black Donald Trump kind of look like, it'd be like one of those Paul Mooney shows at Caroline's, where somebody is giving the crowd everything they want, and it's just getting crazier and crazier and crazier.
Oh man, that actually sounds amazing. I wish I could have experienced that. That's incredible. So, and I'm sure you knew he eventually figured out he wrote for Richard Pryor.
Yeah.
So to have that early influence and then to get to see like the collaborator of your influence has got to be pretty amazing.
Yeah, it was funny. He a lot of people compared them because Paul wrote to them, but Paul's subject matter was so much like Paul was never personal. Like you said, he talked only
No.
about like race. He never actually really talked about himself in that way. So you can see like in the ways that he wrote for Richard, but then you see in the ways that for Richard's life experience, like there's like nobody wrote like the "I lit myself on fire" bit.
Mm-hmm. Which to this day, that whole chunk from Live on the Sunset Strip is still like one of my favorite things in stand-up comedy. Like that is just so like it's like one of those like what the fuck kind of stories that is just like you can't help but just be pulled in by what is you're being told is happening. It's incredible. Okay, so comedy is early on for you. Performance comes later, and then how do you get from Missouri to New York?
So I went to Columbia College in Columbia, Missouri, and I knew I wanted to move to New York the entire time because I was obsessed with New York from like popular culture growing up. You know, like a third of all movies take place in like
Me too.
Manhattan. Yeah, yeah, you're like indoctrinated with it. For everything from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles all the way up to everything takes place in like Manhattan, right? I got a scholarship to study history at grad school at Stony Brook University in Suffolk County, Long Island, which is nowhere near Manhattan. They don't tell you that though.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So studying history. Now this is something I would love to talk a little bit more about as a man slowly approaching middle age. There's a couple of tracks you can pick. You get really into barbecuing and grilling meat, get really into like craft beer, or you can get really into like World War II. That's like I have a joke I've been doing where I say that getting into World War II is the male equivalent of menopause. That's what a joke I've been doing recently. You can't see it, but I also have a model of the Titanic on my shelf. So when it comes to history, was there a particular subject or event that interested you when it comes to history?
It was mostly the entire 20th century. Like that is the craziest century. You have two world wars, you have the Cold War, you have the invention of nuclear weapons, you have people going to space, you have like revolutions, you have the decolonization. Like all of this stuff is going on. So I was just like, I really want to learn about how there's all this stuff going on. I really want to learn something about all of this, because they don't teach you that, mostly in high school. I took IB courses in high school, so that was cool. I got to learn a little bit about the Russian Revolution and some other things. And I had a cool teacher that assigned Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States, and that's like you need to know the real truth, man. It's in here. And once I read that, I was like, I want to know more about other people's countries and things like that.
Oh, absolutely. And was that like a moment? Was that book also one of those like, oh, I wasn't taught the whole truth? Did you ever have a moment like that? because I feel like I certainly have like, oh, there is a lot of shit that they were not telling me for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. It was that, and also it was one of those reasons why not everything Paul Mooney said was like historically correct, but he did get at the basic point of like the hypocrisy of society with his humor, right? So he had this very funny joke. He's like when we were slaves, we used to have 12 jobs, and he goes, and the moment we got free, they put us on the unemployment line, and then, and he's like talking about he goes. When we were slaves, we used to live in the master's house. We used to warm their bed, breastfeed their children. Now we're free. We can't even live in their neighborhood. And he's like, if slavery came back tomorrow, white people would have us back in their house. They'd be like, we have your room here just how you left it.
Oh, that's such a good bit. Oh my god.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Kind of like and the joke kind of like puts a little aloe on the burn of oppression.
Yeah, and just noting the irony of it, right? It's like the way that what oppression looks like, whether it's like interfering in all of your affairs or then neglecting you entirely. It just depends on the context, which is like a great thing if you study like history, because you get to over time you see how systems of oppression change over time and things like that, and and then there's like the hypocrisy of people's like rhetoric, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then you get to see like, oh, that's just a rebranding of this thing from like 40 years ago.
Yeah, we're currently in our post civil rights movement backlash moment, where it's just like we have to now any sort of challenge to the social order means that we now must scare people with crime in order to like clamp down on like the activist class and any of their ideas. That's like totally what happens in the early 70s coming out of the 60s.
No, yeah, you're absolutely right. And I sometimes I don't know exactly how you turn the ship on that and expose it, because it seems like we're also entering this like real like era of like maybe apathy is the wrong word, or maybe it's the perfect word, but like I feel like you tell people the truth, like you expose like the lie, and especially like under the when we had Trump, when Trump was president, and you're met with this overwhelming sense of I don't care
Mhm.
from from the other side, because it's either gonna get us through to what we ultimately want, or we secretly agree. And I don't know quite how you turn the ship around on that one. I don't know if there are any famous examples of that from history where the society righted itself like that.
I don't know. It's very hard. I mean, what you have now is kind of a merger. You have like free market propaganda. So you have propaganda that's just as bad as the Soviet Union or Nazi Germany, but it's just like, but it's part of the free market. So that's what makes it kind of different, right? It's like, like America News Network or Newsmax or these things, they're actually under the umbrella of democracy, but they're like inherently anti democratic projects that are going on. So I don't know. I don't know if there's a blueprint for that, because we've never had this much money going around with all of these different people. People can just start a network or start a YouTube channel, and you know,
No, I know if we can demonetize it, or that seems to be the only way. That seems to be the most effective way, is for something to become less profitable, and then less people become interested in it.
yeah, people got to demand less misinformation. The problem is if it's under free speech, what these people have successfully done is they've blurred the line to where they've said any corporation that doesn't allow me to get buck wild on their platform is therefore censoring me. And it's like, no, you can't just like say Dr. Fauci's a pedophile for like a
Right.
hundred posts in a row. It's just slander a guy.
Exactly. But it's like it's my right to slander. It's like, well, not actually. Actually, not. Oh my. Um. I I'm vibing so hard with what you're putting down, man. And then when you were going to college, did you you're going out to college way out in Long Island, so are you starting comedy at the Comedy Strip then, or is this after graduation?
I was there, so I lived out in Suffolk County for a year. And so the thing that's crazy about Stony Brook is it's by far the economic engine of that entire region. It's a fairly large school, probably 35,000 students, right? But nobody
Hmm.
out there wanted it there because they see it as bringing like the city to them. These are all people that left Brooklyn in the '60s or whatever. So there's no infrastructure to support the campus, which was completely different than when I was in a college town, where it's basically like they allowed 19-year-olds to just run a city in Columbia, Missouri. That's kind of what it is. It's like, here's a city of 100,000 people. You will fill all of the key positions as students and things like that. Have fun. All the bars are named after the schools and everything, and the mascots everywhere. There's none of that. So I decided to start actually commuting from Astoria, Queens after my first year, and that's why I was able to do comedy in the city.
Awesome. I live in Astoria now, and love it. And when you're doing those 5:30 shows, we were talking about the draft year. Who else were you with at that time?
Akash Basine, Regina DeChico, Charles McBee, Teresa De Gaetano, Julie Katakis, Eric Newman. Uh, Man, I want to make sure I'm not, forgetting anybody. But that would be like the most of the core group. So everybody out of that group like ended up having a pretty good career. Akash quit, but everybody else is a working club comic, or more, or better. You know, like Regina is actually
Hmm.
she's opening comic for The View, and she like went on national tours and all this stuff. Eric, Eric,
That's awesome.
Eric did the
And
Tonight Show. Charles McBee's written for like half the shows on Viacom. Um, I'm one of the greatest global superstars in the history of comedy, so we did pretty well for ourselves.
right on, man. And then when when you're starting to get into the alternative scene in New York and like started being around and kind of being regular, did you have like a plan for yourself? Did you ever want to be like the nationally like touring headliner comic? Was that what the goal?
I wanted to be invited somewhere to perform for money, and I wanted to see the country, but I didn't. I knew I didn't want to be like your classic kind of road comic. What's weird is now thinking back that we were in the last days, like the New York alt scene when I started has now gotten big enough, and then combined with social media to where you have people that actually don't do the road at all, which is like something that I never thought was possible slash thought it was even a desirable outcome in comedy. Like actually now there are comedians that actually only perform in one borough of like New York City, and then maybe they'll go to like San Francisco, but there's no funny bone, there's no improvs. There's none of that is on these people's schedule, and they can actually like
Hmm.
have a career, which I didn't think was something you could do.
That's wild to me. Like I always thought the goal. What's interesting is like for us, I feel like the goal was always get to New York so that you're able to perform outside of New York.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
That's so wild.
Yeah, so this New York is a platform, and then also New York should provide you with so many wide ranges of terrible rooms and people like that. You should get good real quick.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I've heard it said that like a year in New York is like 3 years in other cities or something like something to that effect. Um okay, and then so did that has that certainly has happened for you then, right? Like you've been invited places for money by now, I imagine.
Oh yeah, yeah. I get my places for money, and it depends on what it is. It could be me doing stand up. It could be, if I'm doing something with like the last podcast network, like they had us come out to Nashville with them, and we did the Ryman Auditorium. That was great. I got a lot of different things cooking. A lot of my work is in New Jersey because I like worked on building
Hmm.
a market there, and then comedians knew me from whenever, and then some comedians may have moved out here and things like that. So that's always nice. There's always audiences and money in New Jersey. Like the worst shows in Jersey are always like, man, there's only 25 people here that paid $20 a piece. I'm sorry, man.
Whereas that would be like a dream come true on a night in Brooklyn for sure. That's awesome. Yes, and you've got a show in New Jersey, and I think you had a pretty well known attendee recently. I would love to hear about that.
Yeah, that's right. So I've been producing the Brick City Comedy Review for 8 years. I produced a show in downtown Newark, which is like Newark from like a comedy market standpoint is like a godsend. It's like for somebody that's like, hey man, what if there was a city the exact same size as like St. Louis that was a Metro card swipe outside of Lower Manhattan, and it did not have a comedy show running in its downtown. That
Uh-huh.
also like a downtown full of spacious rooms with stages and mics and lights. So yeah, I think one of those things is the New York City pool creates so all the rooms that are close to New York City, right? The New York City talent ends up going. All those people like move to New York, but they neglect like the 9 million people living in New Jersey. So
Hmm.
yeah, we've been running that show, and yeah, it's gotten to the degree to where just last week, Senator Cory Booker was in the audience, so that was nice. I told him we get a lot of senators though, so I told him Mitch McConnell was actually here last month. So don't think you're hot shit just because you showed up, Cory.
Oh, that's amazing. And was he into it? He seems like a guy who's like, I know what cool stand up comedy is.
Yeah, he's insanely nice. And that's like, and that comes through, and he was really very much enjoyed the show. He also knows Newark very well. It's like, it's why he's there. It's because he likes to, give FaceTime to the community, he likes to support the things that are going on there, right? So he was very much into the whole thing, and he and his staff had, looked like they had a great time. There's also a guy's 92nd birthday party, and he was like dancing at some point, at the end of the show while the DJ was playing, and like Cory Booker was like filming it on his phone. So it was great. It actually had gotten kind of out of control at the end.
Amazing. Again, you want to replicate that, get a slice of that Paul Mooney walking the fragile white people out of the room craziness. Well,
Yeah, no,
that's so I was saying that's so cool, man. I'm so glad that your show's at that point because I respect the hell out of show producers. I had a show at the Creek for 2 years, and it was one of the harder things I've done in comedy. Like any audience is easier than like trying to like bring an audience in and then maintain that for a live show. So my hat's off to you, sir.
thank you. It's hard work, but it's harder in New York because you're competing against 10,000 other shows. Even at the Creek, there were all these other shows, right? So for me, it was just like a thing of just like basic market. It's like when if New York City represents like this oversaturated market in a lot of ways when you're talking about the indie scene, right? It's like go do that same thing. It surprised me to this day that like downtown Jersey City doesn't have like a marquee show that has been crushing it for like years. Like I always look at that, I'm like, a city that size with that access to talent from New York City, and it's just I think it's one of those things where I think a lot of times comedians from New Jersey I think kind of undervalue where they live because they haven't lived anywhere else. They see New York City as big, but they don't realize that New Jersey is also the most densely populated place in America. It's also like a very
Hmm.
big platform. Um, Chris Gethard actually is a good example of someone who's actually turned New Jersey very much into his own platform.
Oh yeah, I love I love him. He's great. He certainly has like he did an entire album that's New Jersey centric jokes. He does produces events out there. I think he moved back out there, which I think which totally makes sense for him. And I'm also to what you're saying. I agree with you 100%. because I've been trying. I want to play with my band more in New Jersey because the scene, like emo and punk rock, that kind of scene, all of the best bands come from New Jersey.
Yeah, I remember the hardcore movement. I remember like Thursday was coming out and all of those bands. They were all from like New Brunswick.
My Chemical Romance is from New Brunswick, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, yeah. The weird thing about New Jersey is it's a place people hate, but 1/3 of all entertainers are from there, and then the ones that are from New York City, which is like another probably third, right? Uh, when it's the minute they get any money, the first thing they do is buy like a huge house in New Jersey.
Yeah, that's true because I think I know several like big names from SNL and like Comedy Cellar regulars lived out in like Hoboken, like at a certain point lived out in like Hoboken and Jersey City. I think my brother-in-law has lived in a lot of different places in New Jersey. He's here for it for sure.
Yeah, well, it's like, but I think Eddie Murphy started it because Eddie Murphy wanted to get away from his family on Long Island, so he just built like a giant house like out in like Alpine, and then like Chris Rock did it because everybody wanted to be like Eddie, and then Tracy Morgan did it, and yeah, there's all these other comics, and then there's like the Jersey comics. There's guys like from that same era, like Joe Piscopo. He's like from like Bloomfield / like North Newark. Like that guy was never gonna not live in New Jersey.
Oh yeah, like Joe Piscopo is like if I had to describe New Jersey to an alien, I would show them Joe Piscopo. Absolutely.
It's funny that all the Jersey jokes from early SNL are just like on Joe Piscopo. It's like Joe Piscopo is like Jersey's representative to the world during that period. But you can tell it's all New York writers writing stuff for him. It's like, why are you changing his accent? He's from New Jersey.
I guess you can only write so much of what you know. And again, it's just right across the river, like you were saying, MetroCard swipe, but it feels like so far away. Like I think about this with sports because like I'm a soccer guy, so New York City Football Club play up in the Bronx, and then the Red Bulls play out in New Jersey, and that's like the big thing that we always throw at them. It's like I was like, I'm sure if I timed it out, it's probably similar travel times, but just can't admit it to ourselves.
Yeah, especially the Bronx, because NYCFC they're still at Yankee Stadium, right?
Yeah, we're still at Yankee Stadium. I think there's rumblings that we're gonna do some games on Randall's Island.
Yeah, it's
next season, but yeah, still in Yankee Stadium.
If you don't catch a Express 4 or an Express 5 train, it is longer to get to the Bronx than it is to get to Harrison, New Jersey on the path.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's this and it's this weird like kind of it's kind of like tribalistic like where I'm from pride that I'm just happy to be out of my small hometown in the woods. So everywhere to me is great. I will play New Jersey, Long Island, Bronx, whoever wants to have me. And let me also ask you this. Have I seen you pop up on the History Channel a few times late at night? I'm curious how that has come about.
Oh, yeah. Well, if you watch the show, or I don't know, you could see me on my social media. I was on this last season. I was a repeat like talking head on the show Crazy Rich Ancients.
Mm-hmm.
It's a play on Crazy Rich Asians.
Yeah, and what do they bring you in on? They bring you in as like an authority on a particular set of history and discuss a topic.
So it wasn't like so focused because they actually ended up using me in like 6 episodes. So you just what they're looking for people who were kind of at the intersection of like history and entertainment. So you saw a lot of like like history podcast hosts were on there, or those kinds of things. So that's what they were like. They're like, oh, you're a comedian, but you're also a professor. They're like, so you'll be good on camera. You also have some credibility, and you could maybe do some jokes and things like that. So we'd like to have you on the show. So that's how I came to go. And I was like, yeah, I'll do it, because actually I hadn't had a solid TV credit since Laughs got canceled off Fox.
Yeah, I remember. I remember Laughs.
Well, I guess no, or once CISO got canceled.
Oh, CISO. What'd you do on CISO?
I did Bill Cosby on the Comedy Show, the Stick or Treat. When they just aired Stick or Treat on there, I was Bill Cosby.
Oh, nice. What era of Bill Cosby did you do?
I did disgraced rapist Bill Cosby.
Oh, that's because for those not familiar with the New York comedy scene, Stick or Treat was, I'm gonna say, a seminal Halloween show that happened in New York every year, where comedians would impersonate a comedian, but a very specific type of comedian. So you had Jerry Seinfeld talking about dating a 17-year-old, and then you have very specific take on Cosby. I love that dude.
It was fun to do. It's like he was due to be taken down, and that was when it was like fresh, and people were like, "Ooh, should anybody do this?" So to be able to just kind of lean into that for like 3 minutes, where the audience was laughing, but then sometimes wondering whether they should laugh or things like that. It was like it showed you which jokes were just undeniable in that set. So I remember the one that got the biggest laugh was, I was like, "You may have seen my last special. It was called Far From Finished. In retrospect, that feels like a threat."
Genius. That's hilarious, dude. And then so the History Channel's History Channel calls you to do this show too. So that's I am digging what you're putting them in. Let me ask you this. You have a podcast, and I think I work for the company that works with your podcast network. Let's talk about your podcast a little bit. What's your show?
So I'm co-host with Sina Ghaznavi on the Fraudsters podcast. It's part of the Last Podcast Network, under the umbrella of like the Last Podcast on the left. And we're a true crime show that focuses on famous, current, past, present examples of financial fraud. And we sort of mix research-based podcasting with comedy. Which company do you work for?
Stitcher.
Oh, okay, very cool. Yeah. We're on Stitcher now, which means we're like everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great idea for a show. So specifically financial crime. What is a case that really blew your mind when you heard of it for the first time, when you were covering it?
Barry Minkow. So Barry Minkow set up a fake carpet cleaning company as a stock scam, and then went to prison for it, and then said that he found Jesus in prison and wanted to make a film about his conversion to Jesus. He found a church, became the head pastor, stole money from the church to fund the film about his conversion to Jesus, laundered all the money on the set. So everybody that was on the movie was getting like checks from random shell companies to get paid. He randomly gets Mark Hamill, Talia Shire, James Caan, and Ving Rhames to be in the movie. And the movie is all about how he converted and found Jesus, and it's supposed to be this redemption story. Meanwhile, it's actually his greatest scam. So it's the most meta, I think, of all the things. And you can watch this movie. It's called Con Man. Oh, and by the way, he insisted that he play himself in the second half of the movie, and he can't act.
Oh my god!
So the whole story is crazy.
amazing. Like he just came full circle. So I thought for a second he was making a documentary, but this was a scripted movie.
It's a
Amazing.
scripted movie, and he clearly like made up stuff. Like it's like because he wanted to be in the creative process. So Ving Rhames' character is supposed to be like almost kind of like a Green Mile situation, like a tough as nails black character that helps Barry Minkow. But it just doesn't make any sense. It's just like it's like Ving Rhames, world class actor, with the real Barry Minkow, a guy who's never been in anything or taken an acting class. And Ving Rhames is like, Barry Minkow, I see your fighting spirit. And what you have to do now is bring the word of the Lord, Barry Minkow, who has totally changed. And you're like, what the fuck is this movie?
Oh my god! I mean, that story tells me I respect the professionalism of Vin Rhames, because that is a guy that if you need him to show up and deliver lines and with heart and conviction, he's gonna do it no matter what. That's what I've taken from that bit.
Yeah, we profile a lot of people where it's crazy how far some of these people can take a lie. And this guy gets a studio film made, with like four like very reputable like big names in Hollywood, and he managed to like rope them into all of this, and it gets released and everything. Now now it's just like a monumental fraud. I heard that he's actually they're actually gonna finally do a documentary on him, because now true crime content. Our podcast was kind of the wave of that. Now you're starting to see documentaries start getting greenlit, and limited series.
Yep.
So that's kind of an interesting thing. Now we were part of the podcast wave. Like if you say what are our competing, like Scam Goddess or like Scammed or a few of these other things came out. Now we're seeing like basically the outlines of our podcast be made into things that are being sold to streaming networks.
Ain't it a bitch? Sometime this business.
Yeah, we're waiting on one, because we know one person. We know one person totally just is going to do our podcast without us in it, and it's going to be really. We're just waiting to watch it just to see how much they took.
Oh man. Well, I hope I well, well, first off, your podcast sounds amazing. I'm definitely gonna check it out, and to have this specific niche, because there's tons of people talking about like murder, death, and dismemberment and what have you. But I feel like, and given what I know of you and your comedy, and I feel like this is perfectly in line with your voice, and I really dig that you're doing it, man. That's really
cool. You've been doing this show for how many years now?
I think I'm coming up on 6 now. I'll hit episode 300 early next year.
Yeah, congratulations! It's amazing. I'm always just like, it's the cool thing about podcasting is you just have no idea who's listening, and then they just like come up to you, or you get an email, and like that's kind of cool to know. Like you always get the surprise of you never know who's listening or who knows you from where. I've had students be like, I listen to your podcast, and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's really cool to have those moments. And yes, and you're a professor as well, and I know you've got you have a comedy album out, and did you do like an independent special also?
Yeah, I did, but I don't think it's on the internet anymore, which is good, because I'm now kind of looking for a deal. Like I'm like, well, I actually don't want video of those jokes out, because I want to actually like do them all in a video where I'm getting paid more. So that's my new thing. That's my new thing now, is trying to line up some kind of deal to find out if I can get distribution. Or now, even if I decided to self-distribute, let's say like no one's interested, they don't want to buy it or anything like that. I'm just a little bit more savvy about, like where to get money and things like that. I have a bigger fan base now too, right? I was like back then, I'm like, I just want to show people I can do an hour on tape. And it was okay. It was a good experience. And it got into some film festivals and things like that, which was nice. It got me at the Friars Club. That was a cool experience, But there was actually no other reason to have done that at that point.
No, I understand what you're saying now, because now that you have like, again, you have a fan base and you have a platform, you can afford to be a little bit more selective. You can do like the quality over quantity thing, because for the longest time we're just like throwing as much stuff out there as possible to just be seen by anyone. And now that you've got eyeballs, you can calm it down a little bit. So do you think a special is going to be your next thing you want to
Oh
create?
yes, I want to film something, but yeah, I have to find out the production. I know who will produce it. I just want to figure out the distribution. And I've been working on all this stuff. And what's great is that with the state of comedy now, so much stuff is coming out now. I don't even feel that much pressure.
Yeah, I guess that kind of makes sense. You can just kind of like you can just sort of like vibe it out, and then especially like if you're not like um continuously like doing national tours and having to worry about, oh, I got to make sure I sell enough tickets in Boise. Again, there's a couple of different ways to approach this thing, and it sounds like you're finding the way that works the best for
Yeah.
you.
And also, I don't feel a lot of pressure because there's just like a lot of not good comedy just getting released out there.
Yeah, I haven't watched. I've been. I'm in my old age. I pretty much like focus on only the things that I really like and respond to. But it does seem like there's definitely a lot of head turning. Like, huh, that was someone thought this was good enough. Yeah, I hear what
Yeah,
I
it's
hear
not
what you're
hating on
saying.
nobody artistically. It's
Um,
like they know it's not finished too. If you were to talk to them, would you go like it's just the standard for what a special is has changed, right? Like a special now is just meant to, you just got to get enough streams initially or whatever. It's not like Chris Rock where there's just like 7 years of space between every HBO special, and you really got to knock it out of the park. And it really like you can now is as long as you kind of get people to watch, you can actually. I mean, I've like I mean, I've watched people bomb specials now. I'm watching specials where people are bombing now.
oh wow, you'll have to tell me off the mic which ones are those, so because I'm curious. But I know whatever you put out is going to be rad, because I just I think you're a funny guy. You're an insightful guy, and I've always liked when we've gotten to share the stage. And I think you did my show at the
Yes.
Creek once. I seem to remember that. So I look forward to seeing. I look forward to seeing what you do next. And if you figure out any of this like inside show business stuff, let me know, because I don't. I'm just out here on my I'm just out here on my podcast style, and like putting it out there and seeing what comes back.
That's exactly the same thing. I don't know anything about. It's all mysterious. Like the podcast, the way even Cena and I hooked up. What's funny is I didn't. I knew the last podcast on the left because I used to watch a friend perform improv in Murder Fist, but I had no idea of what the last podcast on the left
Hmm.
even was. I knew it was those guys that were in the basement of the creek. And then so to be on their network, it was actually
Yeah,
all chance, and it was about me hosting Sirius XM radio with a guy, with my co-host Sina Gazdevi, and it was because Jeffrey Joseph, the comedian who used to be a writer for Living Color, Sopranos, he's been on a lot of stuff. He recommended me,
yeah.
so that's it's always like I don't think there's any rhyme or reason. I think it's just like you're just out there doing stuff, and you just get emailed opportunity every once in a while.
Yeah. And and that's something you can control. Like show business can get, I feel like, can get a little manning sometimes, but you can always control if you're doing stuff, and that's a cool thing to see. Dude, it's been a blast talking to you. What else can we plug? We got justinwilliamscomedy.com. Where else can people find you if they want to check
Please
out
join
your
my
stuff?
Instagram that's only 4 months old. I need more followers to get into show business because show business now is about how many Instagram followers you have now. So please follow me at Justin dash underscore Justin underscore Williams underscore comedy.
Well, you'll get 3 follows, one from me, one from my podcast, and one from my band. So we're gonna get you into show business here soon, man. And thank you again for doing the show, and it's a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much, Will. I appreciate it. Good to see you, brother.
All right, that is Justin Williams. Very funny guy, very insightful guy. Love talking to that dude, and can't wait to see what comes from him next. So, links to all of Justin's stuff is in the description. That's our show for today. If you enjoyed this and think you know a friend who would be interested in this as well, you can send them to awesomedisaster.com. That's got links to everywhere that you can get the show. We are on Apple, Stitcher, and Spotify. If you want to give us a rating and a review on iTunes, on Apple Podcasts, that helps other people find the show there as well. You can also give us a follow on Stitcher and Spotify. And if you guys want to go a little bit further and support the show, you can check out our merch store, as well as check out patreon.com/awesomedisaster. And I will have some more stuff for you in the very near future. We are going to have a replay of my previous conversation with goalkeeper drummer Cody next week, in anticipation of his next appearance on the show. And I will let you guys. We'll talk about it once I get back. But I have some very interesting travels coming up, so we'll talk about it soon. So thank you guys again so much for listening, and I will see you next time between Awesome and Disaster. Stay safe, wear a mask, get vaxxed, get boosted, and stop out fascism. Take care, everybody.